My name is Richard Hartley, and I'm 83 years old now, sitting in my study in Portland, Oregon, looking back at a moment that happened 31 years ago, a moment that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and the woman I'd loved for 20 years. Some truths are like cancer. By the time you discover them, they've already metastasized through every aspect of your existence. It was a Sunday in October 1992. Sarah and I had driven from our home in Seattle to visit her parents in Tacoma, as we did every third Sunday of the month. 20 years of marriage had established these patterns: Sunday dinners with the Brennans, holiday rotations between families, the comfortable rhythms of a life we thought was built on solid ground. Frank and Dorothy Brennan lived in a craftsman house near Wright Park, the same house where Sarah had grown up. Frank was a retired Boeing engineer, methodical and precise. Dorothy had been a nurse, then a stay-at-home mother, then a volunteer at everything that would have her. They were good people, salt of the earth, the kind of parents everyone wished they had. Sarah and I had been trying to have children for 5 years by then. 3 miscarriages had left us emotionally exhausted but still hopeful. We were both 38, aware that time was running out but not ready to give up. The fertility treatments were expensive, invasive, and Sarah had been going through another round of IVF. We hadn't told her parents about this latest attempt. Sarah wanted to wait until we had good news to share. That October Sunday started like all the others. We arrived at noon, Frank greeting us at the door with his standard joke about checking if we'd gotten lost since last month. Dorothy hugged us both, lingering a bit longer with Sarah, the way mothers do when they sense their children are struggling. "You look tired, honey," Dorothy said to Sarah. "Just work," Sarah replied. She was a pediatric surgeon at Children's Hospital, and the excuse of exhaustion always worked. We settled into the living room, Frank offering beer to me and white wine to Sarah. She declined, saying she was taking antibiotics for a sinus infection. I knew the real reason. The fertility doctor had her on a strict no-alcohol regimen, but kept quiet. The house smelled of pot roast and apple pie, Dorothy's Sunday standards. Frank and I talked about the Seahawks' chances this season, the presidential election coming up, the new roof he was considering. Safe, masculine topics that required no emotional investment. "Richard," Frank said after about an hour, "want to help me grab a special bottle from the cellar? I've been saving a 1982 Bordeaux for a good occasion." "What's the occasion?" I asked. Frank glanced at Dorothy, something passing between them. "Just family being together. That's occasion enough." The Brennans' basement was accessed through a door in the kitchen. Wooden stairs led down to a combination storage area, workshop, and wine cellar that Frank had built himself. He was proud of that wine cellar, temperature-controlled and organized with the precision of his engineering background. I followed him down, the stairs creaking under our weight. The basement was dimly lit, smelling of sawdust and old newspapers. Frank's workshop occupied one half, tools hung on pegboard with outlined shapes showing where each belonged. The wine cellar was in the back corner, a converted room with insulated walls. "The Bordeaux is in the back," Frank said, leading the way. "Been saving it since Sarah graduated from medical school." That's when I heard it, Sarah's voice from the kitchen above, clear through the old heating grates. "Mom, I need to tell you something." "What is it, honey?" Dorothy's voice, concerned. "I'm pregnant." I stopped moving. Frank was still heading toward the wine cellar, hadn't heard. My heart jumped. Pregnant. After all our trying, all the heartbreak. But why was she telling her mother without me? We'd agreed to wait until the second trimester this time, to be sure. "Oh, Sarah! That's wonderful! How far along?" 14 weeks. 14 weeks? That couldn't be right. Our last IVF transfer was only 8 weeks ago. I must have misheard. "Does Richard know?" Dorothy asked. "No. And he can't know. Not yet. Maybe not ever." The floor seemed to tilt. Frank had found his bottle, was examining the label, completely unaware that my world was collapsing 20 feet away. Sarah, what are you saying? Dorothy's voice had changed, lower, worried. It's not his baby, Mom. I stood frozen behind Frank, who was still selecting wine, completely oblivious to the conversation destroying my life above us. My legs felt weak, but I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but listen. What do you mean it's not Richard's? Dorothy's voice was sharp now, the nurse in her coming out. Sarah Elizabeth Brennan, what have you done? It's complicated, Mom. Uncomplicated. Now. I heard chairs scraping, probably them sitting at the kitchen table. Frank was talking about tannins and proper storage temperature, his voice a meaningless buzz against the conversation upstairs. You know we've been trying for years, Sarah said. The miscarriages, the treatments. Richard's count is so low, and what he has, the morphology is all wrong. The doctors gave us less than a 2% chance, even with IVF. So you went elsewhere? Dorothy's voice was ice. Not exactly. Mom, you have to understand. Richard wants a baby so badly. Every miscarriage destroyed him a little more. He blamed himself, even though I told him it wasn't his fault. The last one, he cried for days. A man who never cries, just sobbing in our bed. That doesn't justify. Please, just listen. Dr. Morrison, our fertility specialist, pulled me aside after our last failed attempt. He said there were other options. Donor sperm, but Richard would never agree to that. He's too proud, too traditional. He wants his child, his genetics, his legacy. So you used donor sperm without telling him? No. Yes. Not exactly. Sarah, stop dancing around this. What did you do? There was a long pause. Frank had selected 3 bottles now, was heading back toward the stairs. I grabbed his arm. Frank, wait. Tell me about your workshop. I'm thinking of setting one up myself. He brightened, immediately distracted. Oh, well, let me show you my setup. It's taken years to get it just right. He set the wine down and led me to his tool area, started explaining his organization system. I nodded, made appropriate noises, but every fiber of my being was straining to hear the conversation upstairs. The donor, Sarah was saying. It wasn't anonymous. It was someone I knew. Someone who looks enough like Richard that no one would question it. Who? Dorothy's voice was barely a whisper. Tom. Tom? Tom who? Not Tom Morrison. Tom Morrison. My best friend. My business partner. The man who'd been my best man at our wedding, who came to dinner every Tuesday, who I trusted with everything. It only happened once. Sarah was saying, her voice tearful now. We didn't plan it. Tom and his wife had just separated, he was vulnerable. Richard was in Chicago for that conference. Tom came over to fix the sink. You know Richard's useless with plumbing. We had wine, too much wine. Started talking about the fertility problems. He said he wished he could help, that Richard deserved to be a father. And then, you slept with your husband's best friend. It wasn't like that. It was clinical, almost. We both knew what we were doing and why. For Richard. To give him the baby he wanted. Don't you dare pretend this was for Richard. This was selfish, Sarah. Cruel and selfish. You don't understand the pressure, Mom. Everyone asking when we're having kids. Richard's family calling me defective. The looks at baby showers. The pity. And Richard, sweet Richard, defending me, saying if anyone was defective it was him, taking all the blame. Frank was showing me his radial saw, explaining the importance of proper blade maintenance. I wanted to scream, to run upstairs, to confront them all. But I stood there, paralyzed, as my marriage revealed itself to be a lie. Does Tom know? Dorothy asked. About the pregnancy? No. We agreed never to speak of that night again. He transferred to the Portland office 2 weeks later. Richard thinks it was because of the divorce, but really Tom couldn't face him anymore. Tom had transferred. Said it was for a fresh start after his divorce. I'd been hurt but understood. Now I knew the real reason: guilt. You have to tell Richard the truth, Dorothy said. I can't. It would destroy him. You know how he is about loyalty, about trust. His own father cheated on his mother. He's never forgiven him. If he knew what I'd done. What you've done is worse than cheating. You're making him raise another man's child without his knowledge. It's still partly mine. And I'll raise it to be just like Richard. He'll never know. He'll figure it out. What if the child needs medical treatment? What if there are genetic issues? What about blood type? Tom and Richard have the same blood type. I checked. And Tom's family medical history is clean. I was thorough, Mom. I'm a doctor, remember? You're a fraud is what you are. The harshness in Dorothy's voice was shocking. I'd never heard her speak to Sarah that way. Maybe. But I'm a pregnant fraud. And Richard will finally get to be a father. Isn't that worth something? Not like this. Not built on lies. Then what do you suggest? I tell him now? I have an abortion? I destroy my marriage and his friendship with Tom? I take away his only chance at fatherhood? I don't know. But this secret will eat you alive, Sarah. And when it comes out, and these things always come out, it will be so much worse. Frank was still talking, but his voice had become white noise. My mind was racing, processing what I'd heard, trying to find some other explanation. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe this was about someone else. Maybe I was having a stroke and hallucinating the entire conversation. Richard, you okay? Frank was looking at me with concern. You've gone pale. I need to use the bathroom. There's one down here through that door. I stumbled into the small basement bathroom, locked the door, and gripped the sink. The man in the mirror looked like a stranger, wide-eyed, ashen, 20 years older than when I'd walked down those stairs. Tom and Sarah. My best friend and my wife. The two people I trusted most in the world. And a baby that wasn't mine but that everyone would think was mine. I thought about confronting them immediately. Storming upstairs, revealing what I'd heard. But something held me back. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the strategic part of my brain, the part that had built a successful logistics company from nothing. Or maybe it was just cowardice. I splashed cold water on my face, tried to compose myself. I had to go back upstairs eventually. Had to sit across from Sarah at dinner, pretend everything was normal. Had to kiss Dorothy's cheek goodbye, shake Frank's hand, drive home with my pregnant wife carrying another man's child. When I emerged, Frank had opened one of the bottles and was pouring a taste. 1982 was a great year, he was saying. Perfect weather in Bordeaux. You can taste the sunshine. I took the glass, my hand somehow steady. The wine was probably excellent, but it tasted like ash. Should we head up? Frank asked. Dinner's probably ready. We climbed the stairs, me carrying 2 bottles, Frank carrying one and the glasses. The kitchen was empty now, Sarah and Dorothy back in the living room. They looked normal, composed, as if they hadn't just been discussing the destruction of my life. There you are, Sarah smiled at me. I was starting to think Dad was giving you the full workshop tour. Just the highlights. I managed. Richard was asking about setting up his own workshop. Frank said. I told him he's welcome to use mine anytime. That's sweet, Dad, but you know Richard's not exactly handy. Everyone laughed. Richard the executive, useless with tools. Richard the provider, who paid others to fix things. Richard the fool, raising another man's baby. Dinner was torture. Dorothy had made pot roast with carrots and potatoes, my favorite. I forced myself to eat, to compliment the cooking, to participate in conversation. Sarah was glowing, and now I understood why. Pregnancy hormones. 14 weeks. Tom's child. You look happy tonight, honey, Frank said to Sarah. Just glad to be here with family, she replied, reaching over to squeeze my hand. Her touch burned. How many times had those hands touched Tom? Just once, she'd said. But was that true? How many other lies were buried in our 20 years together? Any news on the baby front? Dorothy asked, and I saw Sarah stiffen slightly. We're still trying, Sarah said. Actually, we have another IVF appointment next week. Another lie. She was already pregnant. The appointment was probably just a regular prenatal checkup that she'd disguise as fertility treatment. These things take time, Frank said kindly. Dorothy and I tried for 3 years before Sarah came along. Worth the wait, though, Dorothy said, but her eyes were on Sarah, complicated emotions playing across her face. After dinner, we sat in the living room looking at old photo albums. Dorothy had pulled out Sarah's baby pictures, probably thinking about the grandchild she now knew was coming. Sarah's baby photos showed a beautiful child with distinctive green eyes and dark hair. I wondered what Tom's baby photos looked like. Would our child, no, her child, look like these pictures? Would everyone comment on how much the baby looked like Sarah, politely ignoring that it looked nothing like me? Remember this? Dorothy pointed to a photo of 5-year-old Sarah on a swing. You were fearless. Always going higher than all the other kids. Still fearless, Frank said proudly. But I saw Dorothy's expression. She knew better now. Sarah wasn't fearless, she was reckless. Reckless with my trust, with our marriage, with the life we built. We left at 8, after coffee and Dorothy's apple pie. The goodbyes were stilted, at least to my eyes. Dorothy hugged Sarah longer than usual, whispered something in her ear. Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. Frank shook my hand, clapped me on the back, told me to come use his workshop anytime. Drive safe, he called from the porch. Supposed to rain later. The drive from Tacoma to Seattle took 45 minutes on a Sunday night. 45 minutes of sitting next to my wife, pretending everything was normal while my world had fundamentally shifted. Sarah was quiet for the first 10 minutes, then turned on the radio. NPR was doing a segment on the presidential election. Bush, Clinton, Perot. She started commenting on the candidates, trying to draw me into conversation. I think Clinton might actually win, she said. People are ready for change. Maybe, I managed. You okay? You've been quiet all evening. Just tired. Your stomach bothering you? You barely touched dinner. A little. She reached over, put her hand on my thigh. Mom's pot roast is pretty heavy. I'll make you some tea when we get home. Home. Our house in Queen and overlooking the Sound. The house we bought 5 years ago, planning to fill it with children. The nursery we painted twice, then repainted neutral after the second miscarriage. The home that was supposed to be our sanctuary but was actually built on quicksand. I was thinking, Sarah said, maybe we should take a vacation. After this IVF cycle. Regardless of the outcome. Just get away, the two of us. Where would we go? Somewhere warm. Hawaii maybe? Or Mexico? We haven't been anywhere just for fun in years. A baby moon, I realized. She was planning a baby moon before she discovered she was pregnant. We'll see, I said. She squeezed my thigh. I love you, you know. I know. But did she? Could you love someone and lie to them so fundamentally? Could you love someone and sleep with their best friend? Could you love someone and make them raise another man's child? When we got home, Sarah went straight upstairs to change. I stood in our kitchen, looking around at the life we built. The coffee maker we'd received as a wedding gift. The mismatched chairs we'd bought at an estate sale during our first year of marriage. The refrigerator covered in magnets from our travels, Paris, Tokyo, New York. Every object told a story of us, But now I wondered how many of those stories were lies too. I called Tom from my study, using the phone in there so Sarah wouldn't hear. "Richard!" He sounded surprised. "How are you, buddy?" "Good. Listen, I was thinking of driving down to Portland next weekend. Thought maybe we could grab dinner." "Oh, sure. That would be great. Everything okay?" "Yeah, fine. Just miss hanging out." "Me too. How's Sarah?" The question made my stomach turn. "She's good. Great, actually." "Good, good. And the baby stuff?" "Still trying." "Right. Well, don't give up hope. It'll happen when it's meant to." It already had happened. Just not the way anyone would admit. After I hung up, I sat in my study thinking. I could confront Sarah now. Demand the truth. But she'd probably deny it, and I had no proof except an overheard conversation. Or I could wait, gather evidence, figure out what I wanted to do with this information. Sarah knocked on the door. "Coming to bed?" "In a minute." She came in, wearing one of my old t-shirts, looking beautiful and treacherous. "You sure you're okay? You've been off all evening." "Just thinking about work." She came behind my chair, started massaging my shoulders. "You work too hard. Stress isn't good for fertility, you know." "Is that your medical opinion?" "It is. Doctor's orders, less stress, more sex." She kissed the top of my head, and I had to force myself not to pull away. "I'll be up soon," I said. After she left, I opened my computer and started searching. DNA tests were becoming more available. Paternity could be established after birth with 99.9% accuracy. I bookmarked several labs, already planning. Then I searched Tom Morrison. Found his new address in Portland, his new office, photos from his company's website. He looked the same, tall, athletic, the kind of handsome that aged well. We'd been friends since college, built our businesses together, supported each other through everything. His divorce had been brutal. His wife had cheated with her personal trainer. I'd been his shoulder to cry on, his character witness in court. And this was how he'd repaid me. But even as anger burned through me, another part of my brain was calculating. Sarah was 14 weeks pregnant. That meant conception happened in July. I pulled up my calendar. July 15th to 18th, I'd been at the logistics conference in Chicago. Tom's transfer paperwork was dated July 30th. The timeline fit perfectly. I climbed the stairs to our bedroom. Sarah was already asleep, or pretending to be. I slipped into bed beside her, careful not to touch her. She murmured something, rolled toward me, threw her arm across my chest. For 20 years, this had been comfort. Now it felt like being trapped under rubble. In the darkness, I made my decision. I wouldn't confront her yet. I'd wait, watch, gather proof. I'd let her think she'd gotten away with it. And then, when the time was right, when I had everything I needed, I'd destroy them both. The next 6 weeks were the greatest acting performance of my life. I played the role of excited father-to-be while dying inside with each passing day. Sarah discovered her pregnancy 2 weeks after that Sunday dinner, taking a home test with theatrical surprise. "Richard! Richard, come here!" She called from the bathroom on a Tuesday morning. I knew what was coming but forced excitement into my voice. "What is it?" She held up the pregnancy test, tears streaming down her face. "It's positive. I'm pregnant." I made myself cry. Pulled her into my arms. Spun her around our bathroom while she laughed and sobbed simultaneously. All the while thinking, this should have been the happiest moment of our lives, and you've poisoned it forever. "But how?" I asked, playing my part. "The doctor said our chances were so low." "Miracles happen," she said, looking into my eyes. Maybe that last IVF worked better than we thought. The lies came so easily to her. She'd had weeks to rehearse this moment, to perfect her deception. I wondered how many times she'd practiced her surprised face in the mirror. We called her parents that evening. Dorothy's congratulations sounded forced, knowing what she knew. Frank was genuinely delighted, already making grandpa jokes. We didn't call Tom. Sarah suggested it, but I said we should wait until the second trimester. To be safe. Really, I just couldn't bear to hear his voice pretending to be happy for us. I drove to Portland that weekend as planned. Tom suggested a steakhouse downtown, but I insisted on coming to his apartment instead. "I'll cook," I said. "Like old times." His apartment was modern, minimalist, nothing like the warm family home he'd shared with his ex-wife. Photos from our college days decorated one bookshelf, the four of us, Tom and Lisa, Sarah and me, young and stupid and trusting. "How's Sarah?" he asked while I prepared steaks. "Pregnant." The wine glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the hardwood floor. Red wine spreading like blood. "Shit, sorry," he said, grabbing paper towels. That's amazing, Richard." "Congratulations." "Thanks. We're pretty shocked. Didn't think it would happen." "When is she due?" "April." I watched him do the math in his head, saw the moment of realization, quickly suppressed. "That's great. Really great. You'll be an amazing father." "You think so?" "Absolutely. You've wanted this for so long." "We both have. Sarah especially. She'd do anything to have a baby." He was cleaning up the glass, not looking at me. "She's going to be a great mom." "Yeah." "Hey, remember that night in July when you came to fix our sink? While I was in Chicago." Tom froze for just a second, then continued cleaning. "Vaguely." "Why?" "Just wondering if you noticed anything different about Sarah. That would have been right around conception. Wondering if she seemed different. More fertile, I guess." "That's a weird question, Rich." "Is it? You were probably the last person to see her before we conceived. Just wondering if there were signs." Tom stood, threw the glass shards in the trash. "I didn't notice anything. Fixed the sink and left." "Right. Of course. Must have happened right after I got back then." The rest of the evening was agony for both of us. Tom couldn't meet my eyes. I kept bringing up the baby, watching him squirm. By the time I left, he looked physically ill. "I might transfer back to Seattle," he said at the door. "Portland's great, but I miss home." "That would be amazing. Sarah would love that." The baby could use an Uncle Tom around. He flinched. "Yeah. Maybe." I knew he'd never transfer back. The guilt was eating him alive, and I wanted it to. Meanwhile, Sarah bloomed with pregnancy. The morning sickness was mild, her energy high. She decorated the nursery in yellows and greens, gender-neutral colors for our surprise baby. Our friends threw us parties, gave us gifts, celebrated our miracle. I started documenting everything. Secret recordings of Sarah's phone calls with her mother, where Dorothy repeatedly urged her to tell the truth. Photos of her meeting with Dr. Morrison for prenatal care, that was really just regular obstetric appointments. Credit card records showing purchases for the baby that would never really be mine. At 20 weeks, we had the anatomy scan. Sarah held my hand as the technician moved the wand over her belly, showing us our baby's heart, brain, tiny fingers and toes. "Would you like to know the gender?" the technician asked. "Yes," Sarah said, squeezing my hand. "It's a boy. A son. Tom's son. But everyone would call him mine." "We'll name him after you," Sarah said to me, tears in her eyes. "Richard Jr." The cruelty of it was breathtaking. She wanted to name Tom's baby after me. "Actually," I said, "I was thinking about the name Matthew. After my grandfather. Matthew Hartley. I love it." Matthew Thomas Hartley would be born in April 1993, and everyone would believe he was mine. Unless I did something about it. Matthew was born on April 15, 1993, at 3:47 a.m. after 12 hours of labor. I held Sarah's hand through every contraction, coached her breathing, told her she was doing great. When the baby emerged, screaming and perfect, the nurse placed him on Sarah's chest. "He looks just like you," Sarah said to me through her tears. But he didn't. I saw Tom in the shape of his nose, his long fingers, the way his hair grew in a swirl at the crown. Everyone else saw what they expected to see, a baby that must look like his father. "He's beautiful," I said, and meant it. Because despite everything, this innocent child wasn't to blame for his parents' betrayal. Frank and Dorothy arrived that afternoon. Dorothy held Matthew with complicated emotions playing across her face, joy at her grandson, sorrow for the secret she carried. "He's perfect," she said, then looked at me. "You must be so proud, Richard." "I am." Tom sent flowers with a card. "Congratulations to the new parents. Welcome to the world, Matthew. Uncle Tom." Sarah read it and smiled. "That's sweet of him. We should send him a photo." "Maybe later," I said. The first months were a blur of feedings, diapers, and exhaustion. Sarah took maternity leave, and I worked from home when possible. We fell into the rhythm of new parents, and sometimes, in those 3 a.m. feeding sessions, I could almost forget that the baby I was rocking wasn't mine. But I hadn't forgotten my plan. When Matthew was 3 months old, I took him for his pediatric appointment alone, telling Sarah she deserved a break. "I need a favor," I told Dr. Yamamoto, whom I'd known for years. "I'm concerned about some genetic conditions in my family. Could we run a DNA test? Just for my peace of mind?" "Of course. We can do a simple cheek swab. Results take about 2 weeks. 2 weeks later, I had the proof. Probability of paternity 0%. I also had Tom's DNA, obtained from a beer bottle he'd left at our house during a brief visit to meet the baby. He'd held Matthew awkwardly, said he looked just like Sarah, and left after 15 minutes. The private lab confirmed what I already knew: probability of paternity for Tom Morrison, 97%. I had everything I needed. Now I had to decide what to do with it. Part of me wanted to destroy them immediately. Send the results to everyone we knew. Divorce Sarah, sue Tom, take everything. But then I'd look at Matthew, innocent and trusting, and I'd hesitate. This child hadn't asked to be born into a lie. If I exposed the truth, he'd grow up knowing he was the product of betrayal. He'd be the kid whose mother cheated, whose father wasn't his father. The scandal would follow him forever. So I made a different choice. I started moving money quietly. Opened accounts Sarah didn't know about. Transferred assets to holdings she couldn't access. Built a financial fortress for the war I knew was coming. I also started a journal for Matthew. Writing him letters he'd read someday, explaining everything. Why I stayed. Why I left. Why I loved him despite everything. "Dear Matthew," one entry read. "Today you smiled at me for the first time. A real smile, not just gas. And I realized that biology doesn't make a father. Choice does. I choose to be your father for as long as I can, even though the truth will eventually come out." Sarah noticed me pulling away emotionally but attributed it to work stress and new parent exhaustion. She suggested counseling. I agreed, knowing it was a farce but needing to appear to be trying. Dr. Patricia Chen's office was in Fremont, overlooking the canal. She was young, earnest, believed in the power of communication. "What brings you here?" she asked in our first session. "We've been distant since the baby," Sarah said. "I want us to reconnect." "And you, Richard?" "I want honesty," I said, looking directly at Sarah. "I feel like there are things unsaid between us." Sarah shifted uncomfortably. "Like what?" "I don't know. Secrets, maybe. Things we're afraid to tell each other." "I don't have any secrets from you." The lie came so easily, even in therapy. We went for 6 sessions. Each time, I pushed closer to the truth, and each time Sarah deflected. Dr. Chen probably thought I was paranoid, but she tried to help us rebuild trust. Trust is the foundation of marriage, she said in our final session. Without it, everything crumbles. I agree, I said. Which is why betrayal is so devastating. It doesn't just break trust. It poisons every memory, every shared moment. Sarah reached for my hand. We've never betrayed each other. We're solid. I let her hold my hand but felt nothing. The woman I'd loved was gone, replaced by this stranger who could lie with such conviction. Matthew was 18 months old when everything finally collapsed. It started with a phone call from Dorothy. Richard, I need to talk to you. Privately. We met at a coffee shop in Wallingford, halfway between our homes. Dorothy looked older, worn down by the weight of her daughter's secret. I know that you know, she said without preamble. How? Mother's intuition. The way you look at Sarah. The way you hold Matthew, like you're memorizing him. You heard us that day, didn't you? In the kitchen? Yes. Dorothy started crying. I told her to tell you. Begged her. This secret is poisoning everyone. Except Sarah. She seems fine. She's not. She has nightmares. She's started anti-anxiety medication. The guilt is eating her alive, but she's too proud to admit it. Good. Richard, what are you going to do? I don't know yet. Matthew needs a father. Matthew has a father. Tom Morrison. Tom is a sperm donor. You're the one raising him. Based on a lie. Dorothy reached across the table, grabbed my hands. I'm going to tell you something Sarah never would. She loves you. Truly. What happened with Tom was desperation, not desire. She wanted to give you a child so badly that she lost herself. That doesn't excuse it. No, but it explains it. She made a terrible choice from a place of love. Love doesn't lie, Dorothy. Love doesn't betray. Love doesn't make you raise another man's child unknowingly. You're right. But people do terrible things when they're desperate. And Sarah was desperate. I left that meeting more conflicted than ever. That night, watching Sarah give Matthew his bath, I saw what Dorothy meant. Sarah's eyes were hollow, dark circles despite concealer. Her hands shook slightly. She was falling apart, maintaining the facade but crumbling inside. You okay? I asked. Fine. Just tired. Matthew's been sleeping through the night for months. I haven't. Insomnia? Something like that. That weekend Tom called. First time in 6 months. Richard, I need to see you. Both of you. It's important. What's wrong? Just, can I come up? Saturday? He arrived looking worse than Sarah. He'd lost weight, his clothes hanging loose. His hands shook as he accepted coffee. I'm dying, he announced. Sarah's cup crashed to the floor. What? I managed. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. Diagnosed 2 months ago. 3 to 6 months, they say. Sarah was frozen, staring at him. I watched her face, saw the progression of thoughts, shock, sorrow, then fear. I'm sorry, Tom, I said, meaning it despite everything. I need to get my affairs in order. Make sure everything's handled. And I need to tell you both something. Here it comes, I thought. The deathbed confession. That night, he started, looking at Sarah. When I fixed your sink. Sarah went white. What about it? I asked, playing innocent. Something happened. Tom, don't. Sarah whispered. I have to. I can't die with this secret. He turned to me. Sarah and I slept together. Once. We were drunk, it was a mistake, but it happened. I forced shock onto my face. What? It was my fault. Tom continued. I was vulnerable after the divorce, she was emotional about the fertility issues. It meant nothing. Nothing? I stood up. You slept with my wife and it meant nothing? Richard, please. Sarah was crying now. It was a mistake. One time. We were so drunk. When? July. When you were in Chicago. I did the math out loud, slowly, watching their faces. July. 7 months before Matthew was born. The room went silent. Is Matthew? I couldn't finish the sentence. Sarah sobbed harder. Tom looked at the floor. We don't know, Tom said. It could be yours. The timing. Don't, I said quietly. Don't insult me further with more lies. I pulled out the DNA test results, placed them on the coffee table. Both of their names, Matthew's name, the percentages. I've known since Matthew was 3 months old. Sarah stared at the papers, then at me. You've known for over a year? 15 months, actually. Why didn't you say anything? I wanted to see how long you'd let me live the lie. Apparently, forever if Tom hadn't grown a conscience. Tom was crying now too. Richard, I'm so sorry. If I could take it back. But you can't. And now you're dying, so you want absolution? Fine. I forgive you, Tom. You'll be dead soon anyway. But you, I turned to Sarah, you I'll never forgive. Sarah reached for me, but I stepped back. I've already filed for divorce. I lied. You'll be served Monday. I want the house, full custody of Matthew, everything. You can't take him from me. Watch me. I have proof of adultery, fraud, conspiracy. You and your dying boyfriend conspired to defraud me into raising a child that isn't mine. Richard, please. Think about Matthew. I am thinking about Matthew. He deserves better than a mother who lies and a biological father who's dying. Tom stood up, swaying slightly. I should go. Yes, you should. And Tom? Don't contact us again. Die with whatever peace you can find, but don't come near my family. After Tom left, Sarah and I faced each other across 20 years of marriage. I did it for you, she said quietly. To give you a baby. You did it for yourself. To avoid admitting we couldn't have children. To avoid considering alternatives like adoption or donor sperm that would require my consent. You would never have agreed. Exactly. Because consent matters, Sarah. Choice matters. You took away my choice. I gave you a son. You gave me a lie shaped like a son. Matthew started crying upstairs, awakened from his nap. We both moved toward the stairs, then stopped. He needs me, Sarah said. He needs honesty. Something you're incapable of. But I let her go to him. Despite everything, she was his mother. And I was, what? The man who'd been tricked into loving him? No. I was his father. The only father he'd ever know. Tom would be dead within months. Sarah was broken. But Matthew still needed someone whole, someone who could love him despite the circumstances of his conception. That night, I moved into the guest room. Sarah didn't protest. We began the slow process of untangling 20 years while trying to maintain stability for Matthew. Tom died 7 weeks later. Sarah wanted to go to the funeral. I refused to let her take Matthew. He's Tom's son, she said. He's my son, I corrected. I'm on the birth certificate. I'm the one who's been there every day. Tom was just a sperm donor who couldn't keep his hands off my wife. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. I got primary custody. Sarah's mental health had deteriorated, and her own mother testified about the deception. The house was sold, assets divided. 20 years reduced to paperwork and scheduled visitations. Sarah moved back with her parents. Started therapy, serious therapy this time. Slowly began rebuilding her life. She sees Matthew every other weekend, and he loves his time with her. He doesn't know the truth yet. Someday I'll tell him, when he's old enough to understand that people can do terrible things for complicated reasons. I'm 83 now, and Matthew is 31. He looks more like Tom every year, but he acts like me, methodical, thoughtful, a planner. He's married with 2 kids of his own. He calls me Dad, and that's what I am. Not by blood, but by choice, by presence, by love despite everything. Sarah is 79, still living in Tacoma. We're cordial now, after 3 decades of careful reconstruction. We share holidays for Matthew's sake, for the grandchildren. The sharp edges of betrayal have worn smooth, leaving only sadness for what we lost. Last month, cleaning out old boxes, I found the wine from that October Sunday, the 1982 Bordeaux Frank had selected while my world collapsed above us. I'd saved it all these years, unable to drink it, unable to throw it away. I opened it alone, toasted the strange journey that began with an overheard conversation and ended with a son I chose to love despite everything. The wine had turned to vinegar, bitter and undrinkable. But sometimes that's what truth tastes like, sharp, unpalatable, but ultimately necessary. The conversation I overheard behind that wall destroyed my marriage but gave me clarity. It revealed that love without trust is just elaborate performance art. It taught me that people will do unconscionable things to avoid difficult truths. And it showed me that being a father has nothing to do with DNA and everything to do with showing up, day after day, even when the child you're raising was conceived in betrayal. Dorothy was right that day in the coffee shop. Matthew needed a father. And despite everything, I chose to be that father. Not because I had to, but because love, real love, is a choice you make every day, even when, especially when, the truth behind it is devastating. That's my story. Hidden behind a wall, I heard my life collapse. But from that collapse, I built something different, not better perhaps, but honest. And in the end, honesty, even brutal honesty, is all we really have. 6 months after writing this account, Matthew found this manuscript while helping me move to assisted living. I'm 84 now, and the stairs in my Seattle townhouse have become mountains. He sat in my study, reading every word while I pretended to pack books. When he finished, he looked at me with Tom's eyes, I can admit that now, but with an expression purely his own. Is this true? Every word. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, thank you. For what? For staying. For choosing to be my father when you didn't have to. I did have to. The moment I held you, biology became irrelevant. We've never spoken about it directly before. Sarah and I had agreed to tell him when he turned 18, but that birthday came and went, then 21, then 30. The right time never appeared, or perhaps we were cowards. Now, at 31, he finally knows. Does Mom know you wrote this? No. Are you going to tell her? That's your choice. He visited her that weekend. They talked for hours, she says. About Tom, whom she barely remembers, just a tall man who fixed a sink and changed everything. About the desperation that drove her to betrayal. About me, choosing fatherhood despite everything. Sarah called me after. You could have destroyed me completely back then. I could have destroyed Matthew completely. There's a difference. Is there? You stayed for him, not me. I stayed for him. I left because of you. Both were the right choice. Strange how clear things become near the end. The rage that once burned so hot has cooled to understanding. Not forgiveness. Some things can't be forgiven, but understanding. Sarah was 38, desperate for a child, watching her marriage dissolve into parallel lives. She made an unconscionable choice from a place of panic. I was 38, building an empire while my marriage crumbled, too blind to see what I was losing until it was gone. Tom died believing I hated him. I didn't. I pitied him, dying at 40, leaving behind a son he'd never know, carrying guilt that probably accelerated his cancer. He and Sarah created Matthew in betrayal, but Matthew himself transcended that origin. My grandson, James, Matthew's eldest, Looks like me. Not biologically possible, of course, but mannerisms are inherited through proximity, not DNA. He tilts his head when thinking, drums his fingers when impatient, laughs at the same bad jokes. He's mine in every way that matters. Dorothy lived to 92, taking the secret to her grave as she'd promised. Frank never knew. Before she died, she told me, "You were the son-in-law I prayed for, even when Sarah didn't deserve you." She deserved better than me too, I admitted. Just in different ways. The assisted living facility is nice, water views, good food, nurses who pretend my stories aren't repetitive. Sarah visits monthly. We play cards, discuss Matthew's promotion, the grandchildren's achievements. We're like actors who've performed together so long we can improvise seamlessly, even though the original script is long forgotten. Last week, she brought photo albums. Pictures of Matthew growing up, learning to walk, first day of school, graduation. In every photo, I'm there, teaching him to ride a bike, attending soccer games, walking him down the aisle at his wedding. "You were a wonderful father," she said. "I was the only father he had." No. You could have been obligatory, distant, resentful. You chose to be wonderful. Maybe that's my real legacy. Not the successful business I built and sold. Not the money carefully invested for grandchildren's educations. But the choice to love a child conceived in betrayal, to be his father when biology said otherwise. The wine glass sits on my desk here, the one Tom dropped when I told him Sarah was pregnant. I kept a shard, had it made into a paperweight. It catches the light, creating tiny rainbows. Beautiful and sharp, like truth itself. Matthew drove me here today, helped me arrange my few remaining possessions. Before leaving, he hugged me. "Dad? I love you. I love you too, son." Son. The word that shouldn't apply but does. The title I earned not through genetics but through presence, patience, and the daily choice to stay when I had every reason to leave. That's the thing about family, it's not really about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, who chooses to love despite having every reason not to. Behind that wall, I heard my life shatter. But sometimes things need to shatter to be rebuilt properly. Even if what you rebuild looks nothing like what you started with. Even if the wine has turned to vinegar. Even if the child you raise has someone else's eyes. Love is a choice. And choices, more than blood, make us who we are. Richard Hartley, Room 237. Sunset Manor, Seattle. Still choosing every day.